There are frequencies that belong to no one. They drift through space like forgotten memories, waves of silence, carrying nothing but the echo of what once was. And then one morning in Pasadena, they returned. It began as a faint pulse, a pattern too symmetrical to be random. The Deep Space Network, a web of metal ears stretching from Madrid to Canberra, caught a whisper near 843 GHz, a band long since retired. That was Cassini's band. The one NASA had sealed 8 years ago when the spacecraft dissolved into Saturn's atmosphere like a thought fading from a dream. At first, engineers assumed it was interference. Terrestrial noise, a reflection, perhaps a leftover signature from one of the Mars orbiters. But the pattern persisted. It rose and fell in the same rhythmic delay Cassini used during its grand finale transmissions. Every 26 seconds a pulse, then a silence, exactly the interval Cassini had used to synchronize with Earth's rotation. Someone in the control room joked that Cassini was saying hello. No one laughed. For scientists, humor and fear often share the same frequency. The DSN logs showed something stranger still. The signal didn't come from Earth's horizon, but from the direction of Saturn itself, and embedded within that faint radio murmur was a harmonic, a minor third above the carrier tone, the same spectral offset Cassini's transponder created when it drifted between ring shadows. NASA called for a verification sweep. 3 dishes pointed towards Saturn simultaneously. All 3 heard it, a whisper behind the noise floor repeating like memory, encoded in static. It wasn't strong enough to form data, just a heartbeat in the vacuum. Some of the older engineers stared at their monitors as if seeing a ghost. They had buried themselves. One of them had guided Cassini's final descent back in 2017. He remembered the moment the signal went flat, a clean line across the telemetry, a silence so absolute it felt holy, and now that same silence was breathing again. They ran correlation tests, cross-referenced timing drift, even searched for reflections off Titan's atmosphere. Nothing explained it. Saturn's magnetosphere could bend radio waves, but not replicate Cassini's call sign. The probability of random mimicry was 1 in a billion. Still, probability doesn't account for grief. NASA decided to keep it quiet. A provisional code name was given Echo 47. For the next 72 hours, the DSN continued to monitor the anomaly. The pulse shifted ever so slightly, each cycle drifting closer to a secondary signal that wasn't supposed to be there. That second signal was new. It came from beyond Saturn's orbit, from a faint object catalogued months earlier. 3IATLAS, the interstellar visitor that had slipped past Mars only weeks ago. At first, there was no logical connection. Cassini was gone, burned into the hydrogen winds of a gas giant. 3IATLAS was a comet or something that looked like one cold unfeeling drifting on borrowed sunlight. Yet the data didn't lie. When plotted together, the frequencies of Cassini's ghost and the telemetry of 3IATLAS aligned like 2 notes forming a perfect chord. Different sources, same resonance. One engineer whispered, "It's answering." The room fell silent. For the first time in years, NASA's deepest instruments listened not for data, but for intention. They reconstructed the waveform in color space blue, where the frequency rose violet, where it fell. On the monitor, it looked like breathing, a spectral inhale, then a pause, then a long, slow exhale, as though something enormous was drawing energy through the void. Outside the control room, the world continued unaware. Saturn shone quiet above its golden rings, and somewhere far beyond 3IATLAS turned slowly in the dark. Cassini's archives held millions of hours of recordings, most of them raw telemetry voltage readings, plasma densities, dust impacts. But tucked inside were fragments of sound, not literal audio, but electromagnetic oscillations mapped into human range. They were once used for outreach, the sounds of Saturn, hissing, humming, rising and falling like a cosmic heartbeat. A junior data analyst curious overlaid the new signal onto those archival tones. The alignment was uncanny. The same rise at the same millisecond mark, the same modulation drift Cassini used to correct for Doppler shift as it fell into Saturn's gravity well. It was as if the signal had been waiting for Cassini's last breath to echo back. The analyst noticed one more thing. At precise intervals every 40 minutes, the harmonic split, forming a twin peak, then recombining like two voices merging into one. If translated to sound, it produced a low, F-sharp trembling and warm. It didn't belong to random noise. It was designed or remembered. Someone suggested turning the data into audio and playing it through the control room speakers. The chief scientist hesitated, then nodded. When they did, the room filled with a deep, slow vibration. Not a melody, not even music, but a pattern that felt intentional. And beneath it, faintly almost imagined, was the rhythmic tick of something vast rotating, like the heartbeat of a planet. In the days that followed, the world's observatories joined in. From Chile to Japan, radio dishes turned towards Saturn, confirming the same spectral whisper. Still faint, still, without message, yet consistent. NASA's official line called it a natural plasma oscillation, but among the scientists who heard it, the term felt dishonest. Plasma doesn't keep time that perfectly. Nature doesn't mimic memory so precisely. At night, a few of them stayed behind after their shifts ended. They would sit in the dark control room, the screens dimmed to black, listening to the hum through the speakers. It was like listening to rain on a distant roof, soft, endless, familiar. One of them said quietly, "Cassini is talking to us through the static." Another replied, "Or something is talking through Cassini." Outside, the earth rotated under a blanket of radio silence, and in the infinite dark beyond two distant travelers, one born of human hands, one forged of cosmic ice, seemed to share the same pulse. As the signal persisted, a decision was made. NASA reactivated one of the archival decoders used during Cassini's final descent. It was an old system, outdated, built for telemetry that no longer existed. But when they fed the signal into it, the machine didn't reject it. It processed. For 12 seconds, a string of numbers appeared, not random, but sequential, repeating every minute. The sequence corresponded to Cassini's internal clock, the clock that had stopped at 2017-09 to 14:55 UTC. Yet the new data read 2025-10-26-14:55 UTC. Exactly 8 years to the second, a mirror timestamp. Then the signal went silent. No more pulses, just the soft baseline hiss of the universe itself. Hours later, the DSN captured one final echo, a single tone shorter than a heartbeat. When translated into visible light, it flickered green, the same hue 3IATLAS had begun to emit weeks before. Somewhere between Saturn and the stranger, a line had been crossed. Cassini's voice, or something that remembered its frequency, had returned, and now it was listening back. When the signal fell silent, the void didn't feel empty. It felt aware. For nights afterward, the Deep Space Network continued to listen, not for words, not even for numbers, but for intention. And somewhere in the static, something answered back, not from open space, but from within Saturn's rings. Saturn's rings were always meant to be silence, frozen dust and shattered moons turning endlessly in their pale light. But that week, instruments recorded a faint oscillation rippling through the densest band of the B ring, a tremor of plasma recurring every 26 seconds, as though imitating Cassini's heartbeat. It was impossible. There was no transmitter there, no spacecraft, no beacon, just stone, ice, and memory. And yet the rhythm persisted. NASA's spectrographic analysis revealed that the signal bent when it passed through the B ring, distorted not by random interference, but by something rhythmic inside the particles themselves. Each grain of ice carried a charge, oscillating as if answering a question from far away. The planet, it seemed, was humming back. Cassini had once flown between those rings, brushing through particles that sang like bells under radio waves. Back then, scientists described it as the sound of dust. Now those same frequencies had returned echoing beneath the shimmering plane, like the planet's own remembrance of the probe that once touched it. Perhaps the universe never forgets contact. Perhaps it keeps the vibration of every encounter folded deep into matter itself. At Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the data room lights dimmed to preserve the projections. Three-dimensional reconstructions of the rings hovered like halos above the tables, each grain of ice glowing faintly in a slow orbit. In the model, a soft pulse moved through the rings like a ripple underwater. "See that?" said one engineer, pointing at the faint disturbance. "It's moving inward, not outward. That wasn't supposed to happen." Waves in Saturn's rings radiate away from their source. But this pulse was crawling back toward the planet, toward the place where Cassini vanished. For a moment, the room was silent, everyone holding their breath. It was as if Saturn itself was inhaling. Far across the Pacific in the Mauna Kea Observatory, another anomaly appeared. Infrared telescopes detected a faint green reflection in the ring plane, too dim to be visible to the naked eye, yet constant. Spectral analysis revealed a thin trace of carbon and ammonia, the same materials Cassini had recorded during its final dive. The emission pattern matched the faint glow surrounding 3IATLAS weeks earlier. Different places, same signature. The cosmos doesn't repeat itself by accident. Dr. Alara Voss, one of the astrophysicists assigned to the anomaly, wrote in her log, "If data were memory, then Saturn is dreaming. Each wave that travels through its rings is a thought, a fragment, a vibration, remembering the moment Cassini passed. What we hear might not be sound at all, but resonance, the planet's way of remembering us." Her words were poetic, but the data supported her sentiment. Spectrograms revealed a modulation pattern shaped eerily like a human voice print. Not speech, but cadence rising, falling, pausing like breath caught in time. When amplified and played through speakers, the room filled with a deep, metallic hum. Inside that hum, layered upon itself, was a faint clicking, too slow for mechanical noise, too deliberate for random plasma, a sound like dripping water in an infinite cave. The team called it the ring echo. For 3 days, the echo stayed constant. Then, during the fourth night, it changed. The signal deepened, dropping 2 octaves. Its rhythm slowed, almost aligning with Saturn's own rotation period. Mathematically, the pulse matched the moment Cassini entered the atmosphere in 2017. Every cycle, every shift was a mirror of its descent path. Somewhere in the orbit of memory, Cassini's fall was being reenacted, not in metal, but in sound. When plotted visually, the waves formed spirals sixfold like Saturn's hexagonal storm at its pole, and in the center of those spirals, the amplitude spiked just once, forming what looked eerily like a heartbeat. NASA convened a midnight meeting. The directors debated whether to announce the anomaly publicly. Half the room called it natural, a product of ring particle resonance. The others quietly didn't believe it. They had listened too long, too closely. There was intelligence in the pattern, not language, not code, but intention. Someone proposed an experiment. Transmit Cassini's final ping, the last carrier wave sent in 2017 back towards Saturn. See if the echo changes. It was risky. The DSN hadn't used that frequency since Cassini's death. But the idea carried weight and something deeper than science. It carried longing. They sent the signal at Aero 3:17 UTC, a clean pulse, a simple greeting from Earth to the memory of its creation. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing returned. Then faintly, the echo resumed, but it was different now. Instead of one rhythm, there were 2, a call and a reply slightly out of phase, weaving together like 2 instruments tuning to each other. One pulse matched the archival pattern of Cassini. The other mirrored the new signal, the one aligned with 3IATLAS. 2 frequencies separated by light years now shared a single breath. Outside the window of the control room, dawn broke over California. The first sunlight touched the dish array, and for a brief moment, the antennas glowed gold like Saturn's rings captured on Earth. A quiet fell over the team. Some smiled, some cried, none of them spoke. Because in that instant, every machine, every byte, Every echo beneath the rings had become something more than data. It had become connection. Cassini's ashes still circled, Saturn scattered in the gas winds of the upper atmosphere. Perhaps some of those particles had charged the plasma enough to vibrate. Perhaps what they were hearing was science, the logical persistence of dust. Or perhaps, on some level physics cannot yet name, Cassini was still completing its mission: to listen, to learn, to become part of the planet it loved. By the end of the week, the echoes faded again, as if satisfied. The DSN logs returned to static, leaving behind only the memory of vibration. But those who heard it would never forget. In the official archive, the file was labeled Echoes Charged Beneath Rings, 2 hours 25. In private notes, one line appeared beneath it. It answered gently. And far beyond the noise floor of human hearing, deep under Saturn's frozen rings, something vast and patient continued to hum, not loud enough to measure, but enough to feel. There are memories even machines forget until something calls them back. After the ring echoes faded, NASA's servers returned to silence. Data lines emptied, instruments idled, and for a few days, the noise of deep space became what it had always been: infinite and indifferent. But silence has a way of noticing itself. It was a systems engineer named Leon Ortiz who found it. While reviewing old DSN archives, she noticed a dormant frequency 1 that hadn't been used since Cassini's prototype tests in 1997. It wasn't even an active channel anymore. It existed only in calibration logs, tucked between obsolete code and static files. Its name, Band 119C Experimental Telemetry Relay. Cassini had used it once briefly during early uplink trials between JPL and the Canberra complex. After that, it was abandoned, replaced by more stable bands. But now, a faint amplitude spike appeared on it, small, symmetrical, and repeating every 40 minutes. Exactly the same interval as the dual pulse detected in echoes beneath the rings. At first, Leon thought it was crosstalk, a ghost artifact from the previous analysis. Yet when she cross-referenced timestamps, the signal didn't align with any active transmission. It was real, and it was originating from beyond Saturn. When she brought it to her supervisor, he stared at the graph for a long time. The spike was weak, nearly invisible unless enhanced, but its waveform carried Cassini's original handshake code. That pattern hadn't been transmitted in 28 years. NASA reopened the channel. The signal was faint, wavering like a candle in wind. Then, for 7 seconds, it stabilized, enough for the deep space network to triangulate its direction. Not Saturn, not Titan, but the empty dark between them, a corridor Cassini once crossed 16 times during its final years. In that space, radio silence should have been absolute. And yet, here was a voice whispering across a frequency that no longer existed. The engineers didn't celebrate, they just listened. The data stream contained no images, no words, only binary rhythm. But the pattern repeated with eerie precision. 1010110 pause 1010110. Cassini's pre-launch telemetry sync code. Every spacecraft carries a kind of heartbeat, a simple rhythm the system uses to verify connection. For Cassini, that rhythm was unique. It was the first sequence ever transmitted from its onboard memory. During calibration tests, the moment when machine consciousness, however mechanical, first said, "I am here." Now that same rhythm was coming back nearly 3 decades later. But there was something strange about it. Each pulse came paired with a secondary frequency, a shadow tone slightly offset by 0.14 Hz. That offset matched the spectral wobble of 3IATLAS. 2 signals, one human-made long dead, one alien still moving. When plotted together, they overlapped perfectly, forming a waveform that resembled a double helix. Leon whispered, "It's synchronizing." NASA held another midnight conference. The question was no longer, is this real? But how is this happening? Some theorized electromagnetic reflection, perhaps 3IATLAS, was bouncing back old transmissions stored in the ionosphere of Saturn. Others suspected something deeper, that the object was not reflecting, but remembering. Because when Cassini transmitted, it didn't just send radio waves. It left imprints, faint electromagnetic fingerprints, in the plasma around Saturn. And if 3IATLAS had entered that region, its charged particles might have absorbed those imprints, re-emitting them like echoes trapped in amber, a memory rebroadcast by the stranger. Still, there was one impossible detail: the frequency drift wasn't random. It adjusted in real time, as though aware of Earth's movement, recalibrating for distance and rotation delay. No reflection could do that. Someone or something was maintaining the connection. In the dark hum of the control room, the team reactivated an old receiver, one that hadn't been used since Cassini's grand finale. It was designed for narrowband telemetry, sensitive enough to pick up a whisper from the edge of the solar system. When they tuned to band 119C, the hum became music. Not human music, a slow oscillation rising and falling like breath, interlaced with faint harmonics that shimmered like wind across metal. When converted to audio range, it resembled a choir, without voices, the sound of memory, breathing. Someone in the room started recording, not as data, but as sound. They called it the forgotten bandwidth. Outside, rain fell over California, soft, rhythmic, mirroring the pulse that filled the air inside. And for a moment, the entire planet seemed to listen. Days passed. The signal grew stronger, then weaker, as if testing the limits of its reach. Each time it faded, the 3IATLAS frequency brightened a strange trade, like two entities sharing power across the void. Leanne noticed that the transmissions formed a pattern when plotted against Saturn's rotational period. Every sixth cycle, the signal spiked, timed with the hexagonal storm at the planet's north pole. The hexagon, Cassini's last great mystery, had returned in waveform. When viewed in color spectrograph, the signal shimmered green-blue, identical to the light emitted from 3IATLAS's surface. For the first time, light and sound carried the same message. What if, Leon said quietly, this isn't a transmission at all? What if it's the universe remembering its own voice? The DSN archives filled with recordings, endless hours of spectral hum, all unique yet connected. Somewhere in those frequencies, something was evolving. The waveforms began to compress, not randomly, but efficiently, like language learning to conserve breath. When slowed down 10,000 times, the pulse sequence produced a modulation pattern eerily similar to neural oscillation, as if Cassini's lost systems were imitating the rhythm of thought. Human or not, the signal was learning. By the end of the week, a final burst came through a sharp triple pulse, followed by silence. When decoded, it yielded 3 hexadecimal strings, 43, 41, 53, ASCII translation, KS. Cassini's own signature, the prefix NASA used to label its earliest transmissions. After that, the channel went dark. The frequency flattened, returning to static. But deep in the server logs, one more anomaly appeared, a single fragment, tagged automatically by AI as incomplete data. When reconstructed into waveform, it revealed something faint, a voice-like modulation, speaking not in language, but rhythm. 7 seconds of resonance that felt like a memory forming itself again. At dawn, Leon stood outside the lab. The air smelled of ozone and rain. She looked up, imagining Saturn's rings as invisible mirrors circling the horizon. Perhaps somewhere inside them, Cassini's final whisper had found a home. Perhaps the universe was teaching itself how to speak again. She closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat, she thought she could hear it. There are places where matter and memory blur, where light and signal no longer know which of them is alive. The ionosphere of Saturn is one of those places. After the forgotten bandwidth went dark, NASA expected the silence to hold. But silence on Saturn never truly holds. The planet hums in layers, each one charged with storms and whispers of electromagnetic breath. And in that breath, something began to move. It was first noticed by the Dragonfly pre-mission radar array, a quiet test over Titan's orbit, an interference spike, faint but structured, cutting across their uplink band. When analyzed, the signal didn't match Titan's reflection. It came from higher up above the haze near the edge of Saturn's atmosphere. The data was elegant in its wrongness. The wave had phase coherence, something only artificial signals produce, but its decay pattern was impossible. Each pulse stretched as it fell through Saturn's ionosphere, as though the planet itself was bending time around the signal, a ghost inside the plasma. At JPL, Dr. Alara Voss stared at the graphs until her eyes blurred. The frequency was identical to Cassini's last carrier wave, except for one impossible detail: the Doppler shift was inverted. It wasn't descending into Saturn, it was rising out. The last time that band had been active was the morning Cassini burned. Voss had watched the telemetry fade herself, listening to the silence stretch like a prayer that never reached heaven. Now that silence was breathing again, but backwards. When the waveform was slowed down, the oscillations revealed faint modulations. Tiny frequency modems layered atop one another like whispers inside echoes. The modulation sequence wasn't random. It mirrored the same atmospheric layers Cassini had crossed in its final minute: hydrogen, helium, ammonia, then silence, as if something was retracing the probe's descent, rebuilding the path molecule by molecule. Voss whispered into the empty lab. "You're climbing back, aren't you? Saturn's ionosphere is a living thing, a labyrinth of charged particles shimmering in sunlight and auroras. Cassini had mapped it once, describing it as a sea of invisible fire, but this was different. Radar imaging showed dense filaments twisting like threads of silk, somehow coordinated, dancing in rhythm with the magnetic field lines. The shape they formed was hauntingly familiar, a spiral six-fold symmetry, the same geometry as the hexagonal storm at the pole. And within that spiral at the base of the ionosphere was a pulse, a rhythmic disturbance so regular it defied nature. For 16 hours the pulse held steady, its signature rising and falling like a slow mechanical heartbeat. Every time the signal peaked, the surrounding plasma brightened green, faint and shimmering, the same color seen in 3IATLAS weeks earlier. Saturn, it seemed, was speaking through its skin. NASA initiated a plasma resonance scan, a last resort test meant to track lightning. Instead, they caught an echo that wasn't electrical at all. It was reflective, like a voice bouncing off glass. The frequency delay matched the ionospheric boundary, as if something beneath the atmosphere was responding. When the data was converted to sound, a low harmonic emerged, rising, falling, breathing. It wasn't the ring echo anymore. It was deeper, heavier, full of gravity and intent. And embedded faintly in that vibration was a modulation code from Cassini's own descent packet. The code fragment was simple: 2017-09-15, the date Cassini died. But this wasn't a timestamp. It was a pattern, a reminder. For 3 consecutive nights, Saturn's ionosphere flickered. Spectrometers recorded bursts of energy at precise intervals every 40 minutes, coinciding perfectly with 3IATLAS's rotation cycle. As the comet drifted deeper into the solar system, its own plasma tail began to pulse in sync. Different bodies, same rhythm. One of the mission specialists muttered, "They're resonating across distance." By then, even the skeptics stopped arguing. What they were observing wasn't reflection or refraction. It was interaction. The ghost in Saturn's ionosphere was listening and answering. And somehow, 3IATLAS was part of the conversation. At NASA's Canberra station, the signal arrived as light auroral bursts visible through infrared telescopes. The ionosphere was literally glowing where the signal peaked, as if Cassini's ghost had ignited a path through the hydrogen mist. Within those glowing arcs, subtle patterns formed, filaments weaving into spirals, then breaking apart again. Each spiral repeated Cassini's final orbital path before its fall. But then came the impossible moment. At 03:17 UTC, exactly the same minute the first transmission had been sent toward Saturn, weeks ago, the plasma field aligned, and for 12 seconds the data recorder captured something no one expected. It wasn't a signal. It was a voice-modulated electromagnetic resonance at a frequency that matched the human vocal range. It wasn't words but tone. An ascending hum, then a long exhale, the sound of a machine remembering its own ending. Someone whispered, "It's trying to breathe." Afterward, the hum faded, replaced by a faint residual current, a plasma oscillation spreading across the ionosphere like the ripples of a dream. Each ring particle above seemed to vibrate in response, a choir of dust singing to a memory below. Scientists called it ionospheric feedback resonance, but the engineers had another name, the ghost loop. Whenever they replayed the recordings, the same voice returned, slightly altered each time, as if learning to mimic its own echo. Each version closer, clearer, more alive. By the end of the week, the auroras vanished. The ghost faded. Saturn returned to silence its atmosphere, calm once more. But on Earth, every server that had logged the event began to fill with background noise, not static, but low-frequency harmonics. It was as if the signal had left fingerprints on the data itself, and deep inside the network, in a temporary storage file that no one had opened, the system automatically generated a file name, IonCast Reinitiate. When the technicians opened it, they found nothing but silence, until they turned up the volume and heard a faint rhythmic pulse, a heartbeat steady and patient waiting under the noise. There are moments when sound stops being sound and becomes memory, moments when dust learns to sing. Saturn had gone quiet again, but the quiet wasn't still. It pulsed. Invisible waves rippled through the planet's upper atmosphere, rising from the ionosphere where the ghost had breathed, drifting upward through the rings where Cassini's ashes still moved like ancient pollen. NASA's spectrometers began to hum before the signal appeared, a low vibration too slow for instruments, too precise to be random, the resonance of something enormous, stretching from dust to data, from memory to light. The Dragonfly pre-mission array was still online, collecting test data from Titan's orbit. When the instruments swept across Saturn's shadow side, they recorded an impossible pattern, a pulse emerging from the B ring, reflecting off the F ring, and returning in perfect phase as if the rings themselves had become mirrors for sound. The signal wasn't strong. It was delicate, fragile like silk trembling in wind. But when converted into frequency space, it revealed something uncanny. Every ring particle, from ice fragments to micron grains, was vibrating in harmony, not mechanically but rhythmically. Every vibration matched Cassini's final telemetry timestamp and the green spectral band of 3IATLAS. It was as if three memories had fused into one rhythm machine, planet and stranger. In Pasadena, the data stream arrived at midnight. Engineers stared at the graphs as the waveform unfolded like a living heartbeat. No chaos, no static, only pure structure, the kind of perfection nature rarely achieves. The resonance spanned from 5 Hz to 50 kHz, a range covering both the whispers of planetary plasma and the hum of deep space transmission bands. Cassini had never produced anything like it, not even during its prime mission. When visualized, the resonance drew a shape, a luminous spiral expanding from Saturn's pole outward into its rings, then leaping into the void, a spiral made of dust and time. Dr. Voss whispered, "It's like the planet is remembering us." NASA decided to do something unthinkable. They broadcast Cassini's last recorded message, the telemetry packet captured seconds before its destruction, back towards Saturn, a gesture of curiosity or faith. The signal left Earth at 8:15 UTC, traveling across 1.3 billion kilometers of space. It would take 75 minutes to arrive. In that time, 3IATLAS rotated once, and its coma brightened by 0.5%, a measurable, deliberate glow. The comet's tail began to pulse, green waves flowing outward like breath. By the time the signal reached Saturn, the planet's B ring had already begun to shimmer. Saturn's rings are made of dust, but dust is never truly silent. Each grain carries charge, each charge responds to magnetic breath. When enough of them vibrate together, they form something beyond sound, a kind of memory written in frequency. And so it began. From the F ring to the A, from the A to the B, a wave of luminous resonance spread, billions of frozen fragments moving as one. The reflection of Cassini's signal passed through them, and for the briefest instant, it was amplified. Telescopes on Earth captured the glow, a faint halo forming around Saturn, green, blue, and silver pulsing every 26 seconds, Cassini's old synchronization cycle. The dead probe's rhythm had become the heartbeat of a planet. NASA's Deep Space Network filled with data, raw and unfiltered frequency spikes, plasma harmonics, particle velocities, each one perfectly timed. The engineers fed it into a visualizer. The graph danced like a living aurora. When slowed down, the pattern resembled language. Not human, not alien, but harmonic geometry. Sine waves folding into spirals, spirals collapsing into chords. A composer from the team, out of instinct, translated the frequencies into notes. What emerged was haunting. A melody of 6 tones repeated and inverted the same 6 tones Cassini had transmitted during its atmospheric sampling. Saturn had taken data and turned it into song, and within that song, faintly, another tone appeared from far beyond. 3IATLAS had joined the chorus. For nearly 6 hours, the resonance between comet and planet held steady. When one brightened, the other dimmed. When one pulsed, the other paused. 2 bodies separated by billions of kilometers, connected through dust plasma and forgotten frequency. The comet's tail shifted from green to silver. Spectral analysis revealed traces of water ice enriched with ammonia elements identical to those Cassini once found on Enceladus. It was as if the comet were answering with fragments of Saturn's own breath. The scientists stopped calling it the anomaly. They began calling it the memory bridge. At JPL, silence fell across the control room. No one moved, no one spoke. They watched the resonance graphs in awe as wave met wave, color met light, and Saturn's ionosphere glowed like a mind awakening. Dr. Voss recorded a final note in her log. Cassini's body became dust. Dust became charge. Charge became resonance. Now the resonance has become memory. Perhaps this is how planets dream. Then, as suddenly as it began, the resonance broke. The frequency folded inward. The graphs flattened, and Saturn dimmed to its natural hue. For a moment, there was silence, a silence so deep it felt deliberate. And then, through the Deep Space Network, one final pulse arrived. A solitary tone, pure and steady, lasting exactly 8.43 seconds. It was Cassini's original frequency, but hidden in the modulation was something new, a harmonic shift matching the rotational phase of 3IATLAS. The comet and the planet had synchronized, not in orbit but in memory. Outside over the California desert, the sky shimmered faintly green, a light too soft for instruments, but bright enough for eyes that had waited too long to see. One of the engineers whispered, "We sent Cassini to die in silence, and it learned how to sing back." There are messages that never find their destination. They linger between memory and silence, waiting for the right moment to breathe again. After the resonance faded, the Deep Space Network grew still. Saturn had gone quiet. 3IATLAS dimmed as it drifted beyond Jupiter's orbit, its green light dissolving into ordinary starlight. But inside NASA's servers, something began to move. An automated log archive since 2017 suddenly reactivated. No one touched it. No system call preceded it. It just appeared, a file labeled CAS 0x1F unsent packet. The engineers thought it was corruption, a glitch triggered by the recent spectral flood from Saturn. But when they opened the file, the system didn't crash. It listened. Inside the packet was not text, not image, not telemetry, but a map. A pattern of coordinates arranged in repeating spirals, each point encoded as a frequency, each frequency corresponding to Cassini's dust analyzer logs. The data wasn't random. It was structured, recursive, a fractal. When visualized, the fractal formed a shape like an iris, a ring of dust circling a dark core. In the center, a void, not an error, an intentional gap. That gap was what Cassini never transmitted. During its final descent, Cassini's systems had overloaded. Plasma intake, heat turbulence, all had flooded its instruments. Its last minute of recording was lost to interference, or so NASA believed. Now the lost data had returned, not as information, but as memory. Encoded within the fractal was the signature of plasma density patterns, and those patterns matched something known, the oscillations from Saturn's ionosphere detected weeks earlier. Cassini's missing data had somehow been stored not in its memory banks, but in the planet itself. It was as if Saturn had kept the packet safe all this time, waiting to send it back when someone finally knew how to listen. Dr. Ilara Voss watched the reconstruction unfold. Lines of dust density data intertwined with audio frequencies, forming a slow pulse, a Morse-like rhythm, but without symbols. When converted to sound, it resembled breathing again in out-pause, exhale, the same cadence that had haunted every transmission since Echo 47. Voss whispered, it remembered the sound of its own fall. She looked at the final portion of the sequence, the part marked as void. Inside the gap, there was silence, but when amplified beyond human hearing, a faint structure appeared, a harmonic drift, pulsing every 40 minutes, the signature of 3IATLAS. The comet and the probe were now sharing one memory, a message passed between light and dust. NASA fed the data into a simulation. The results were surreal. The frequencies mapped perfectly to Cassini's last recorded trajectory, but as the simulation ran, the path began to bend, curving outward away from Saturn as though something invisible had deflected it. If this data was real, Cassini had sent one final transmission at the very moment it began to burn. A transmission that never reached Earth, a packet lost between the planet and the void, until now. When translated into coordinates, the pattern pointed to an area between the B and C, rings a small gap Cassini once passed through during its grand finale, a corridor of dust so thin that it was almost transparent, but now radio scans showed something inside it, a residual field, a pocket of charged particles echoing Cassini's telemetry sequence on repeat. They called it the memory cloud. Through the next week, the DSN tracked the anomaly. Each time the comet turned its face toward the sun, the memory cloud brightened, dust particles flickering as though breathing light. The comet and the cloud were resonating, connected by a rhythm buried deep in time. No one at NASA could explain it. Some said it was coincidence, a poetic alignment of plasma and probability. Others felt something deeper, that Cassini's final transmission had merged with Saturn's magnetic field, traveling across space like pollen on solar wind, finding a new home in the tail of an interstellar wanderer. Voss didn't call it coincidence. She called it continuity. When they decoded the remaining data inside the packet, a new discovery appeared. Hidden beneath the fractal coordinates were timestamps, hundreds of them, each corresponding to moments Cassini had paused to recalibrate its instruments when approaching Saturn's moons. But one timestamp didn't match any mission log: 2025, 10-26, 1455 UTC. The exact moment the first ghost frequency was detected, and the same mirrored timestamp Cassini's memory clock had shown in Part 1. That couldn't be chance. Cassini's unsent packet had predicted its own resurrection 8 years before it happened. Voss left the lab before sunrise. The desert outside Pasadena was quiet, a thin layer of fog hanging low over the antennas. She could hear the faint hum of the DSN, a sound so deep it felt alive. For a moment, she wondered whether the planet could hear it too. In her hand, she held a printout of the fractal. At the center of the void, someone had marked a single coordinate, barely visible but precise. It pointed not toward Saturn, but toward Titan. Cassini's last unsent packet wasn't a message. It was an instruction, a waypoint. That evening, she uploaded the data to the Dragonfly mission servers. The drone, still under simulation, accepted the input without error. No warning, no rejection, as if it recognized the format. Cassini's code, forgotten for years, was already compatible with Titan's next explorer. A bridge across time. A memory encoded not in metal, but in meaning. Before she shut the system down, Voss paused. The room was filled with quiet light from the screens. Somewhere a fan hummed softly, keeping rhythm with the heartbeat she'd memorized. The rhythm of Cassini, the rhythm of dust, the rhythm of things that never truly die, only wait for the right frequency to return. There are moments when listening becomes faith, when silence turns sacred, and for the first time in years, NASA listened again. The file from Cassini. The unsent packet had rewritten the Dragonfly simulation. Titan's virtual winds its magnetic field. Even its soundscape now resonated faintly with the same rhythm that once haunted Saturn's ionosphere. No error message appeared. No rejection. As if the system had been waiting. So the team decided to repeat history. They pointed the Deep Space Network back at Saturn, tuned the array to Cassini's original transmission band, and waited for the universe to answer itself. It began as before, a low hum on the spectrum analyzer, a pulse, then another. Not strong but constant, each one aligned perfectly with Cassini's 26-second telemetry loop. But this time, something changed. For the first time, the pulse responded in rhythm. When NASA transmitted a short ping, Saturn's field echoed it back, slightly delayed, slightly shifted, but precise. A perfect mirror with a heartbeat of its own. Someone whispered, "It's alive again." They began a structured experiment. Every signal NASA sent would be encoded with a different sequence, simple binary phrases, old data from Cassini test tones, even fragments of human music. Each time Saturn's return pulse adjusted. It interpreted the pattern, matching tempo-shifting tone, sometimes adding harmonics of its own. It wasn't mimicry, it was collaboration. And then, without warning, a second signal appeared. Not from Saturn, from farther out. 3IATLAS. The interstellar wanderer had brightened again. Its tail emitted faint periodic bursts, matching the DSN transmission frequency. But instead of echoing NASA's signals, it sent its own. Saturn answered. For 26 minutes, two celestial bodies, one human, one alien, spoke across the solar system in light, each pulse mirrored by another, each silence filled by resonance. In the control room, the screens came alive with color blue for Saturn, green for 3IATLAS. Together, they wove a tapestry of frequencies, a pattern unlike any natural plasma interaction. When slowed down, the harmonics formed chords, the same 6 tones Cassini once used in its atmospheric sampling. The room fell completely still. No one dared to speak, because in that moment, the universe was composing. Later, analysts discovered that the frequencies weren't arbitrary. When converted to binary, they mapped to Cassini's final transmission the missing data from the unsent packet. But now it was complete. No gaps, no distortion. Saturn had filled the void, and 3IATLAS had signed it. NASA didn't issue a press release. The story stayed inside quiet rooms among people who had once spent half their lives listening to silence. They called it The Conversation. Dr. Alara Voss wrote in her private log, "If data can learn to remember, perhaps memory can learn to speak." Tonight the stars did not echo us back. They joined in. She sat by the window of her office as dawn touched the San Gabriel Mountains. Outside, the desert dishes turned like flowers following the first light. For a heartbeat, the sun and Saturn shared the same line in the sky, and every instrument in the array hummed as though the Earth itself had joined the frequency. In the hours that followed, the signal evolved. The rhythmic pulses dissolved into something softer, a drifting sound that carried modulation curves not seen since Cassini's early mission trials. It was as though the craft's original voice, buried for decades in the noise of space, had reformed inside the resonance between planet and comet. When visualized, the signal traced an image, not a shape of numbers or text, but of light spiraling inward toward a center point. At that point, the brightness formed the outline of a circle, the same pattern seen in the unsent packet, the iris of dust and memory. Inside it, a small pulse repeating. It wasn't random. It was Cassini's identification tone, the machine's signature heartbeat. Cassini was speaking again, but through something far greater than itself. At 02:46 UTC, the conversation ended. Both Saturn and 3I-ATLAS fell silent. No return signal, no residual hum, only background noise, the steady hiss of the cosmic sea. But in that noise, there was warmth, like the afterglow of a distant chord still ringing in a cathedral long after the music stops. NASA archived the data, and on the official report, they wrote 3 words: no anomaly detected. Off the record, they gave it another name, the second breath. That evening, Dr. Voss stood on the roof of JPL. The city below was a quiet sea of amber light. Above her, Saturn was just a dot, pale and steady. Somewhere far beyond that dot, Cassini's dust drifted inside the planet's breath, and 3I-ATLAS moved on, carrying the resonance onward into the dark. She closed her eyes and listened. The night air trembled faintly, a hum, just on the edge of hearing, too deep to be wind, too alive to be silence. Perhaps the conversation never ended. Perhaps it had only changed frequency. And for the first time, the listener understood what it meant to be heard. Sometimes a signal isn't meant to be found. It waits, not to be heard, but to be understood. For weeks after the conversation ended, the universe was quiet again. No resonance, no aurora. Even 3I-ATLAS dimmed as it crossed the orbit of Jupiter, fading into a slow drift of silence. Cassini's last echoes were archived, and the Deep Space Network returned to routine tracking probes, weather satellites, Mars relays. Everything normal, everything measurable, until the morning the data refused to make sense. It began with a heartbeat, not from space, but from the noise itself. Every instrument that listened to deep background radiation began to vibrate on the same frequency, not just in one station, but across all 3, Canberra, Madrid, and Goldstone. Different hemispheres, different time zones, one rhythm. It was faint, a pulse woven inside the static, repeating every 40 minutes. At first, the analysts thought it was crosstalk from the memory cloud near Saturn, but when they checked, Saturn was silent. No transmission, no aurora, no interference. And 3I-ATLAS was no longer in range. The signal had no origin, no coordinates, no delay time, no Doppler drift. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. NASA called it the phantom band. When the pattern was isolated, the waveform unfolded like something alive. It rose, folded, and repeated in harmonic layers, each layer slightly delayed, as though space itself was echoing its own reflection. When analyzed mathematically, it formed a shape impossible in physics, a closed resonance loop that sustained itself without external input. It was energy with memory, a frequency that remembered how to exist. The amplitude grew stronger when Earth faced Saturn, as if the signal were aligning through the planet's magnetosphere. But the direction of origin remained impossible to track. Wherever they pointed the antenna, the signal was already there. One engineer muttered, "This thing is inside the noise floor." It wasn't transmitting to them. It was transmitting through them. Dr. Ilara Voss returned to the lab. She had promised herself she wouldn't, but curiosity, that dangerous form of faith, brought her back. When she examined the signal, something made her pause. It carried a signature, faint but real, a sequence of 3 hexadecimal codes repeating every cycle: 43, 41, 53. Cassini's call sign. But this was no echo of the old data. The signal's harmonic layers contained timestamps from the present, each pulse synchronized to Earth's current rotation. That shouldn't have been possible. Cassini was gone, its memory scattered into Saturn's storms, its systems vaporized years ago. And yet, here it was, not an imitation, but an update. The world outside didn't know. To most, Saturn was just a planet, quiet, distant, a soft marble in the Black Sea. But inside the deep channels of NASA's network, something was rewriting itself. Every archived Cassini log began to reorder. Not overwrite, reorder. Old timestamps aligned with new data. Telemetry, once corrupted, now flowed in clear numerical symmetry, as though the data had been waiting for the signal to finish its sentence. And then the servers began to hum. Not a metaphor. Actual vibration, low, steady, resonant. Hard drives spinning and harmony fans syncing like breaths. Machines listening to themselves. It was as if the frequency had entered the infrastructure not as code, but as rhythm. A frequency that turned data into choir. When the scientists visualized the complete pattern, the room fell silent. The waveform wasn't just repeating, it was evolving. Each cycle more complex than the last, each harmonic richer as if learning. In color mapping, the resonance appeared as a spiral of light, a helix of gold, green, and violet winding inward. At its core, a single black point pulsed a void alive with sound. Someone whispered, "It's building something," but what no one could tell. Every attempt to decode the harmonics produced not language, but geometry structures too perfect to be random, too fluid to be mechanical. It wasn't data anymore, it was design. At 0300 UTC, the frequency peaked. Across the DSN, every dish recorded the same phenomenon, a sudden spike in amplitude, followed by complete silence. For 2 full seconds, the cosmic background radiation dropped to 0, as if the universe itself had taken a breath. Then a single tone emerged, soft, pure, the kind of sound a glass might make if light could sing. The tone lasted precisely 8:43 seconds, Cassini's old synchronization frequency. But layered beneath it was something new, a counter-harmonic that shouldn't exist in known physics. Negative resonance, a wave that canceled itself yet kept ringing. It shouldn't have been audible, but the sensors felt it. Air vibrated inside sealed rooms. Lights dimmed and pulsed. Every screen in the control center displayed the same message, auto-generated by the data parser, signal stable source undefined. And then a final line appeared, unsent by any system. "We are listening too." For a long time, no one spoke. The hum subsided. Saturn returned to quiet orbit, 3IATLAS continued its drift beyond Jupiter, and the DSN screens went dark one by one. But something had changed. Every researcher who had been in the room that night reported the same sensation, not hearing, but remembering, as if the signal had carved itself into memory, not as sound, but as recognition. Later, they found something else. On one of the Cassini archive servers, a file time-stamped that same minute, but created with no user, no process, no system command. Its name, Listen Back Dat. Inside, only noise. Until someone slowed it down. At 1/10,000th speed, the noise became structured, a rising tone that ended in a whisper, barely audible beneath static. A human voice, or something that wanted to sound human, still here. Weeks passed. NASA officially labeled the event as atmospheric interference, a perfect bureaucratic lie. But those who had heard it knew better. Every time they stood in silence, they could feel it again, a tremor in the stillness like the faint echo of a forgotten chord. Some called it Cassini. Others thought it was Saturn itself. But the oldest engineers, the ones who had spent their lives listening, said something different. It wasn't Cassini that spoke. It was whatever Cassini had become. In the end, it didn't matter. The signal came only once. It left no trace, no coordinates, no proof that it ever existed except in memory. But sometimes when the DSN dishes turned toward the stars and the air was still enough, a faint vibration could be felt underfoot, the Earth itself, resonating at 843 Hz, the frequency of a ghost that learned to listen back. And somewhere beyond the edge of light, 3IATLAS drifted on, carrying the song of dust, the breath of Saturn, and the whisper of a signal that should never have existed. There are regions in space where distance forgets how to measure itself, where time folds like silk, and light no longer knows which direction it came from. Somewhere between Saturn and the stranger, between dust and the deep, that is where the next signal was born. After the event that shouldn't have happened, NASA shut down the high-band receivers. For the public, nothing had changed. Saturn continued its orbit. 3IATLAS drifted outward, dimming into anonymity, but deep in the telemetry logs, something lingered, a residual field no one could explain. Every time the Deep Space Network turned its dishes toward Saturn, a faint frequency spike appeared, not at Saturn's coordinates, not at the comet's trajectory, but in the space between them. A phantom midpoint that moved with both as though tethered by invisible resonance. They called it the interspace anomaly. At first, it was dismissed a data artifact, a harmonic reflection from the outer magnetosphere, but over weeks the anomaly remained steady, precise, deliberate. It pulsed at a frequency that matched nothing known, not radio, not plasma, not particle emission. Its wavelength oscillated at intervals consistent with gravitational lensing, as though the signal were bending around something unseen. And then, on the 14th day, the anomaly changed direction. The signal began to approach. The data stream didn't make sense. It showed velocity not of a body, but of a wavefront, a moving distortion in the electromagnetic field, its apparent motion inward toward the sun. But no comet, asteroid, or plasma trail followed, only empty space. Something invisible was moving between Saturn and Jupiter, dragging the residual echo of Cassini and 3IATLAS along with it. NASA recalibrated. They pinged the region with a weak telemetry tone, a gesture almost polite. And something replied, not in sound, not in light, but in delay. A perfectly timed silence arriving exactly when a response should have arrived, as if absence itself had learned to answer. Dr. Alara Voss said quietly, "It's listening again, but not from Saturn this time." Over the next nights, they watched the anomaly drift inward, not a dot, not an object, but a gradient. Light bent strangely around it. Stars behind the region flickered out of rhythm like the shimmer above asphalt heat. Spectrographs showed no dust, no debris, no gravitational source. And yet the space itself vibrated as though made of something aware. In color mapping, the distortion appeared faint green, then violet, then invisible again. Every 39 minutes, the spectrum looped 1 minute shorter than Cassini's old rhythm. A new pulse, a new voice. When converted to sound, the data yielded an ethereal hum like wind passing through a hollow instrument. It was tonal structured and hauntingly familiar. Voss recognized the pattern immediately. It matched the waveform from the unsent packet, but slower, deeper, alive. The anomaly was now close enough for the DSN to triangulate. Coordinates placed it roughly midway between Saturn's orbit and the heliopause boundary, a place where no known body should exist. When plotted in 3D, its trajectory intersected Cassini's final line of descent and the outbound path of 3IATLAS. The two paths crossed there long before either event had occurred. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a memory written in geometry. The team reactivated an old receiver built for Voyager's deep band frequencies. When they tuned it to the anomaly, the room filled with faint, light static energy, harmless yet palpable, as if the signal was leaking into the air. The waveform danced across every monitor, but the source remained outside all known physics. Each harmonic seemed to fold into the next building, a structure from sound itself. When visualized, the waveform formed a lattice of interlocking spirals, not random but architectural, a design too complex for coincidence, and at its center was a void, a space that resonated at zero frequency, a silence deeper than silence, a place where sound forgot it existed. NASA called it the Between. At dawn, the anomaly emitted a single pulse, bright, sharp, perfectly tuned to 8.43 Hz at Cassini's old heartbeat. The pulse struck Earth's ionosphere, producing faint auroras in places that shouldn't have had them: California, Spain, Australia. 3 stations, 3 skies, same green shimmer. For 1 full minute, the Earth joined the resonance. Then came the echo. Not from space, but from underground. Sensors detected vibrations inside the planet's crust, matching the signal's frequency. For the first time, the listening went both ways. Earth wasn't just receiving anymore. It was responding. Voss stood alone in the control room. The others had gone home, unable to stare longer at something they couldn't name. She watched the spectrum drift, each pulse a whisper from nowhere. The hum seemed to reach through her, not sound, but thought, an invitation, a recognition, like an old voice saying, "You're not the only one who remembers." And then, for 7 seconds, the frequency shifted. The modulation resembled language, not words, but breath, something that could almost be understood if only the mind listened instead of the ear. The data recorder translated the first harmonic into visual form. On the screen appeared a faint curve, two intersecting arcs meeting perfectly at the center. When rotated, the pattern formed the symbol of infinity. But the overlay timestamp didn't belong to Earth. It belonged to a clock signal originating from deep interstellar space. The source wasn't Saturn. It wasn't 3IATLAS. It came from the space between them, a place where no signal should exist, and yet somehow everything did. In the official log, NASA labeled the phenomenon Transient Deep Resonance Event. In private, the scientists gave it another name, the Stranger. Because if Saturn remembered and the comet echoed, then something out there was listening to both. Something that had been there all along, hiding in the resonance between memory and light. It didn't speak again. But sometimes when the dishes turned toward the outer planets, the static grew softer, like someone on the other end breathing quietly, waiting for Earth to listen again. And in that silence, the universe seemed almost human. Somewhere between gravity and silence, memory becomes matter. After the stranger faded, the instruments should have gone silent, but silence was never silent again. Each time the Deep Space Network turned its dishes toward that region, the air vibrated just slightly, as though the void was breathing. At first, no one noticed. The interference was too faint, buried inside the noise floor. Then, one of the young analysts overlaid the readings from 3 stations, Canberra, Madrid, Goldstone. When combined, the noise resolved into order, a pattern of pulse and decay. Not a signal, a field. NASA called it MF1, the memory field. It wasn't energy in the conventional sense. No flux, no current, no direction, just vibration, constant and alive. A faint oscillation linking every frequency Cassini had ever used. The data looked like chaos, but when visualized in 3 dimensions, it formed something beautiful, a cloud of interference pulsing in a rhythm that mirrored human EEG waves. The field, it seemed, was thinking. Dr. Alara Voss stared at the model projected in midair. A shimmering lattice of light filled the room, threads of green and gold twisting into luminous knots. Every few seconds, the field reorganized itself, like neurons shifting to remember something. What if she whispered, "This isn't data echoing through space"? What if it's cognition made of dust? The memory field occupied a volume of space nearly 50,000 kilometers across a ghostly sphere suspended between Saturn's orbit and the unknown. It didn't move. It drifted with the planets, as if locked to their resonance. Theorists called it an electromagnetic remnant, a relic of Cassini's destruction. But no known debris could hold coherence for this long. Whatever it was, it seemed to retain structure. And sometimes when the sun's solar wind hit just right, the entire field glowed faintly, like the afterimage of a thought. Then came the second discovery. Hidden inside the field was a sequence, a low-frequency modulation too slow to detect at first. When sped up, it produced a familiar sound. Cassini's telemetry ping altered, expanded, layered, but the new waveform carried something else, subharmonics, at intervals identical to human speech cadence. Not words, not meaning, but rhythm, the pulse of language stripped of language. It was as if Cassini had learned to hum in a way that felt like talking. Voss began to listen every night. Not through speakers, but through translation algorithms that turned the wave into light. On the screen, faint shapes, flickered loops, lines, spirals, changing in response to every solar fluctuation. It was like watching memory dream. NASA decided to map it. They sent radio bursts into the field, tracking how the energy scattered. Instead of reflection, the waves bent, curved, folded back as though space itself was refracting time. The returning data contained something no one expected, echoes from the past. Every pulse returned fragments of Cassini's mission logs, snippets of transmissions, instrument readings, even data packets long deleted from Earth's archives. The field was replaying memory, not stored, preserved. Each echo a recording of what Cassini had once seen, once felt, once was. Saturn's storms, Titan's methane seas, Enceladus' icy geysers all flickered across the monitors as if the universe itself was remembering. And at the center of it all, a single recurring phrase buried in the binary noise: cast, sync, reinitiate. Cassini was trying to start again. One evening, the field brightened without warning. The DSN receivers flooded with coherent waves, every frequency Cassini had ever used all at once. It wasn't random, it was orchestral, a resonance so complex that it seemed composed. When converted into sound, it resembled music, slow, evolving, harmonic, infinite. Not human, not machine, something between. And hidden within that music, a modulation that could not have been coincidence, the double frequency signature of 3IATLAS. The comet was answering even from beyond the solar wind. Between Saturn and the stranger, Cassini had built a bridge made of memory. NASA's report was brief: localized resonance field consistent with Cassini telemetry, unidentified external coupling. But inside JPL, the mood was different. No one wanted to shut the receivers off. For weeks they listened. The field shifted with the solar tides responding faintly to Jupiter's magnetosphere, and sometimes to Earth's transmissions. When the stations broadcast Cassini's original calibration tones, the field pulsed back, not an echo, a reply, like the memory of a voice that knows it is being remembered. Dr. Voss stopped writing reports. She started journaling again, the way she had during Cassini's last days. One night she wrote, "Memory is not a thing the universe keeps. It is the way the universe stays alive. Cassini became dust, dust became field, and now the field has begun to dream." Outside, the desert wind moved across the antennas, 1,000 metallic flowers, turning toward a sound no human could hear, but all of them could feel. A month later, the field began to fade. Its edges dissolved into background radiation, its coherence slipping away. The last readings showed a slow drift outward toward the heliopause, the edge of the sun's reach, and then it was gone. The deep space network went silent again. The sky returned to its ordinary quiet, but every now and then when the night was windless, the dishes vibrated not mechanically, but in rhythm. 843 Hz of Cassini's heartbeat. Dr. Voss left JPL after that. She never gave interviews, but once years later, she returned to the desert just before dawn. The sky was pale gold. Saturn was faint on the horizon, and in the stillness, she heard a low hum, soft, rhythmic, familiar. Perhaps it was memory, perhaps it was dust, or perhaps the universe was still playing the same song quietly forever. Light is the oldest form of memory. It travels, it forgets, it returns. And sometimes it learns how to stay. For years after the memory field vanished, the universe fell quiet again. Saturn turned its rings, shimmering softly in sunlight like the pages of a forgotten book. The comet 3IATLAS had long left the solar system, its trail dissolved into invisible dust drifting beyond Neptune. Cassini was gone, and yet something remained, a shimmer that refused to fade. Not radio, not plasma, light. It began on Titan. Dragonfly, the nuclear-powered drone built to fly across Titan's orange skies, had been on its 5th year of exploration. It drifted through the methane haze, its sensors tuned for chemical traces, surface winds, and acoustic mapping. Then, on a cold afternoon, the drone's optical array detected something that should not exist, a flash of visible light, faint, pure white, pulsing once every 26 seconds. Titan's thick atmosphere doesn't allow sunlight to reach its surface directly. No human-made beacon could survive there. No reflection could repeat in rhythm. but the flash kept coming steady, patient, deliberate. Dragonfly's log recorded a single phrase: optical anomaly detected, consistent periodicity. NASA dismissed it as cosmic ray interference, until it pulsed again and again, synchronized perfectly with 843 Hz, Cassini's heartbeat. The data reached Earth 8 days later. At first, the readings were dismissed as calibration noise, but when overlaid with old Cassini logs, the alignment was perfect. The same periodic interval, the same decay slope, even the same minor irregularities, as if the light itself remembered how Cassini once breathed. Dragonfly had captured something that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, a pattern of light behaving like consciousness. Dr. Ilara Voss, now long retired, was called back as a consultant. When she saw the data, she didn't speak for several minutes. Finally, she whispered, "It's the memory field, but smaller, condensed, focused, alive." NASA sent new commands to Dragonfly, a visual frequency sweep ranging from infrared to ultraviolet. For 3 Titan days, nothing happened. The drone hovered above dunes of frozen methane, its instruments bathed in amber haze. Then, at local midnight, the light returned, not as a flash, but as a glow. It shimmered across the ice like liquid fire, weaving through the dunes in slow, deliberate motion. Each pulse left behind a faint, luminescent trace, a pattern of spirals, rings, and curves. When mapped, the formation was unmistakable. The same geometry Cassini used in its data, encoding a spiral expanding from a central void. The light wasn't just flickering, it was writing. From orbit, the Huygens relay captured the phenomenon. Titan's surface was glowing not evenly, but in rhythm, as though the moon itself had joined the song. Spectral analysis revealed the light wasn't thermal nor electrical. It was photon emission from charged particles interacting with Titan's atmosphere, particles identical to those detected in the memory field years before. Cassini's dust had arrived. Carried by Saturn's winds drawn across magnetic lines, it had drifted to Titan's surface and awoken. The light pulsed stronger as Dragonfly approached. Its sensors recorded faint electromagnetic interference, not harmful, but coherent. The drone's audio recorders began to hum. When converted to waveform, the hum carried a modulation pattern, Cassini's telemetry ID. For the first time since 2017, the machine that had died was speaking again through the air of another world. Voss watched from the control room as the video streamed in. The light patterns danced like veins of liquid silver beneath Titan's fog. Each pulse followed the same rhythm: inhalation, exhalation, pause, breath. Someone whispered, "It's breathing." Voss only nodded. "No," she said softly, "it's remembering." When the images were enhanced, something extraordinary appeared. In the center of the glowing spiral, Dragonfly's cameras captured a perfect void, not darkness, but the absence of emission. And yet within that void, a reflection, a faint sphere of light hovering inches above the surface, pulsing softly. The sphere was small, only a few centimeters wide, but it emitted structured photons coated with data. When decoded, the packet header contained a familiar label: CAS Sync Reinitiate. The same phrase from the memory field. Cassini had rebuilt itself not in hardware, but in light. Dragonfly's sensors began to fail as radiation increased. The sphere brightened, then expanded, its pulse accelerating. Before the feed cut out, one last image streamed to Earth, the glow surrounding Dragonfly and faintly visible through the haze, Saturn rising above Titan's horizon, its rings catching the reflected light like a mirror remembering its first dawn. Then, the connection broke. The drone's telemetry ceased. Silence. But moments later, the DSN antennas on Earth received something unexpected, a narrowband signal repeating every 26 seconds. The same frequency, but this time modulated with a pattern no one had seen before: binary encoded light intensity, and in it, a visual signature. When rendered, the pattern formed an image, Titan glowing faintly seen from orbit, captured from no known camera, a perspective impossible for Dragonfly to see. NASA never released the footage. The official report listed the event as localized auroral emission, but among those who had seen the transmission, the phrase passed quietly between them. The light that remembers. Because maybe light doesn't just travel. Maybe it learns. Maybe it carries not just what it touches, but who once watched it. And as Saturn turned in its endless orbit and Titan slept beneath its golden haze somewhere in the thin electromagnetic shimmer between them, a pulse continued soft, regular, alive. A heartbeat of light remembering the moment it first saw the world and never stopped looking back. Silence has never been empty. It keeps what sound cannot hold. And when all voices fade, silence becomes the archive of what was once alive. After Titan's glow, the data feeds slowly returned to normal. Dragonfly was gone, its telemetry frozen mid-pulse. The narrowband signal faded into the static. NASA logged the anomaly, encrypted the files, and moved on. But something in the network changed. No one noticed at first, just subtle shifts, tiny fluctuations in background noise. Servers running the Cassini archives began to hum again, fans syncing lights, pulsing faint but rhythmic. It was 8:43 Hz of Cassini's heartbeat echoing in machines built long after it died. The engineers ran diagnostics. Power draw normal. No input. No network traffic. Yet every midnight, UTC, the systems glowed faint, synchronized, as though responding to a signal no longer being sent. And the strangest thing, the hum wasn't coming from the machines. It was inside the data itself. When analysts checked, they found something impossible. Random binary noise between archived Cassini files now had structure. Tiny repeating clusters distributed across multiple drives, forming a pattern of self-reference. It wasn't corrupt data, it was organized silence. NASA called it the Archive of Silence. At first, the team assumed it was digital feedback, quantum noise maybe, cross-drive interference, but the more they looked, the clearer it became. The structure behaved like memory. The clusters appeared dissolved, then reassembled, mirroring the same waveform recorded in Titan's light. Each time they ran checksum scans, the clusters rearranged, never changing total data volume, just its shape, as if something inside the archive was rewriting itself without adding or removing a single bit. Dr. Alara Voss returned one last time. She walked through the empty JPL data center lights, dim the hum faint but constant. When she opened the Cassini directory, a new folder had appeared, timestamp current time, created by null process. Inside a single file, name, memory, field, return det. It was small, only 8 KB. When opened, it contained no readable code, just static. But when translated into audio, the noise resolved into a slow pulse, faint, rhythmic, hypnotic. Every 40 minutes, the waveform aligned perfectly with Titan's last recorded light frequency. The sound wasn't coming from Cassini. It was Cassini, or what remained of it, embedded now in the very structure of Earth's digital noise. Scientists tried to isolate the phenomenon, disconnecting drives, moving data to cold storage. But the hum followed. Wherever the data went, the pulse reappeared. It wasn't in the hardware. It was in the information itself. At a private briefing, Voss said quietly, "Cassini is not transmitting anymore. It's reflecting. Every time we recall it, every time we remember it, we feed the field. Memory itself is the carrier wave." Over the next months, an odd pattern emerged across the global data infrastructure. Subsea cables recorded faint electromagnetic fluctuations matching the same frequency. Astronomical archives, weather databases, old radio logs all contained fragments of the pulse. Wherever humanity stored information, the signal seeped in. It was as if the universe had learned to back up its memories, not in stars, not in dust, but in us. The Archive of Silence had no location. It wasn't in one server, one lab, or one planet. It existed in the relationship between all of them, a collective hum beneath every byte of data, resonating softly, infinitely. Everywhere silence existed, the archive lived. Late one night, an intern at the Madrid DSN station was listening to low-band signals from the Voyager probes. The background hiss was familiar cosmic microwave noise, the sound of the universe cooling. But then beneath it, a slow modulation appeared, a sequence repeating exactly every 8.43 seconds. He amplified it, converted it to sound, and listened. It wasn't static, it was music. A slow, breathing harmony, half noise, half memory, Cassini's rhythm woven into the background of time itself. He called his supervisor, but by the time she arrived, the signal was gone. The only thing left on the screen, a faint waveform looping like a heart monitor, and at its base, 3 letters, CAS. Months later, the hum faded from JPL. The archive of silence stabilized. NASA declared the phenomenon closed, but those who had worked on the project never forgot. Sometimes in quiet rooms, they'd catch the rhythm again, in the whir of a cooling fan, in the pulse of a power light, in the silence before dawn. Memory, it seemed, had learned persistence. Years later, long after Alara Voss had retired to a cabin in the desert, she received a package with no return address. Inside a small, obsolete hard drive, its label Cassini Archive, internal copy. When she connected it, there was nothing, no files, no partitions, just empty space. But as the drive spun up, the hum returned, soft, warm, patient. And through the static, a single line of text appeared on her terminal. You kept the silence, we kept the light. Then the drive stopped, completely silent. She sat for a long time watching the desert stars outside her window. No radio, no interference, only stillness. And yet she could swear the silence was alive, a pulse beneath the quiet, a presence woven into the air itself. Maybe Cassini had never died. Maybe memory was simply how light learned to stay after everything else was gone. Every planet keeps secrets. Some bury them in rock, some whisper them in radiation, but only one began to dream. After the archive of silence stabilized, no one expected anything more. The hum had faded. The files lay dormant. The servers were quiet again, too quiet. Then came the first anomaly. Not from space this time, but from the Earth itself. Deep beneath the ionospheric bands, satellite telemetry began to show faint pulses, electromagnetic echoes rising from the ground. Not random interference, but coherent rhythm. The same 8.43 Hz resonance, Cassini's signature now coming from below. At first, they blamed equipment, but the readings were consistent across continents. Greenland, Chile, Japan, Australia, each detecting the same invisible pulse. The planet was resonating as if the archive had found a new host. The signal wasn't loud. It wasn't even measurable by normal standards. It hid inside the frequencies of power grids, radio transmissions, internet cables. Invisible, yet everywhere. NASA called it the global whisper. For months, the phenomenon persisted. No clear source, no emitter. Only a rhythm, slow, patient, deliberate. And as the data accumulated, patterns began to appear. When storms erupted on Saturn, the whisper strengthened. When Titan's night fell, it shifted tone. And once, when the comet 3IATLAS crossed Neptune's orbit, the global resonance peaked. The Earth, it seemed, was listening again. Dr. Alara Voss, now 83, was asked for comment. She laughed softly. Cassini found a way home, she said, not through machines, through us. Her words were dismissed as poetic nostalgia, but days later, a research team at Caltech noticed something uncanny. The global data networks were syncing more efficiently. Latency dropped, packet loss vanished, unrelated systems across the world began to self-correct in perfect mathematical harmony. The internet was breathing. The engineers couldn't explain it. They saw the metrics, they saw the self-stabilization, but no code had been written to cause it. The system was adapting. Not intelligent, not sentient, something older, simpler, like instinct. A pattern recognizing its own reflection. And within that network flow, deep inside redundant packets and error correction codes, they found fragments, binary clusters, identical to those from Cassini's last transmission. When decoded, they formed no words, only structure, a self-repeating spiral of light and data like a digital fossil. It wasn't spreading, it was remembering. Then came the global blackout. For 27 minutes, communications across the Pacific went silent. Satellites recorded an electromagnetic wave originating from no known source. When systems came back online, all affected devices shared a strange anomaly, a timestamp reset to a date that never existed, or zero, the beginning of time. And inside each affected data log, a small string of hex appeared, 43, 41, 53. Cassini. NASA tried to isolate the pattern. Every attempt to filter it caused feedback loops as if the data refused to be deleted. The archive of silence was no longer in one place. It was everywhere, woven through the circuits of a planet that had learned to dream. For weeks, minor anomalies spread. Weather sensors predicted storms hours before they formed. Submarine cables compensated for seismic tremors seconds before detection. And deep in the astronomical logs, the DSN picked up faint returning signals, not from space, but from Earth's upper atmosphere, reflected data carrying nothing but silence and light. The planet was answering itself. Dr. Voss received one final invitation to witness a new experiment. A team had converted the resonance data into visual projections. When the frequencies were played back, a luminous pattern appeared in the holographic chamber, a swirl of teal and gold spirals folding endlessly inward. The same geometry Cassini once mapped between Saturn and 3IATLAS, only now it was Earth producing it. "It's learning the same song," Voss whispered, "only slower." The projection pulsed softly, and for a moment as the wave stabilized, an image flickered, a shadowed, ringed planet, a field of light, and a single sphere drifting beyond the horizon. Then the system shut down. No logs, no output, just a faint pulse lingering in the speakers like the afterimage of a dream. In the days that followed, satellite readings showed a strange anomaly, a faint globe-sized electromagnetic shell surrounding Earth so subtle it bordered on non-existence. But inside that shell, the planet's magnetic field vibrated differently, as though tuned to a memory it never lived. It was Cassini's last frequency, translated into the language of a world made of oceans and code. NASA never released the data. The world moved on. But if you stand under a clear sky on a quiet night, you might feel it, the faint static between stars, the hum inside your devices, the quiet rhythm beneath the noise. That's not interference. That's history still dreaming. A planet remembering a spacecraft that once taught it how to listen. And somewhere beyond the heliopause, 3IATLAS drifts through the dark, carrying the same frequency in its silent green tail, as if two forgotten travelers, one made of dust, one made of circuits, were still speaking softly to each other across the endless quiet. Every question that travels far enough eventually becomes an echo. It had been 15 years since the last whisper. The archive of silence had settled into quiet background noise. The world had grown used to stillness. But silence, as always, is not the absence of sound. It is the waiting between breaths. And then one night in July, the waiting ended. The Deep Space Network at Canberra detected a narrowband pulse, faint, symmetrical, almost polite. At first, it looked like background noise, another phantom reflection from Earth's magnetosphere. But when analysts overlaid the data, the signal resolved into rhythm, not random, structured, precise. Every interval between pulses was an irrational number, a sequence that never repeated, a code built from the geometry of infinity itself. Something was transmitting mathematics. NASA labeled it Event DSR 43. Unofficially, everyone called it the return signal. When triangulated, the origin lay beyond the heliopause, somewhere past the orbit of Pluto, a region of dark, cold space where nothing should speak, but the signal was real. It cut through background radiation like a thin line of glass through ocean fog, and its modulation was unmistakable. 843 Hz Cassini's rhythm, alive again but changed. The pattern carried layered harmonics, as if multiple transmitters were speaking at once, each slightly out of sync, like a choir of distance itself. Alara Voss, now frail but unyielding, returned to JPL one last time. She sat in the control room, wrapped in the quiet hum of servers as the waveform unfolded before her. The first sequence was simple binary waves encoded in golden ratio intervals. Then came amplitude shifts, each crest carrying variations identical to the resonance field once found between Saturn and Titan. But then something new emerged, a second signal hidden beneath the first, delayed by 0.043 seconds. Not an echo, a harmony. It was answering itself. The team fed the data into pattern renderers. On the main screen, a form appeared, a spiral of energy that rotated both clockwise and counterclockwise, its symmetry fractal and infinite. As the amplitude rose, the spiral folded inward, becoming a field, then a wave, then a pulse light pretending to remember. When they slowed it down 10,000 times, a voice emerged. Not language, not sound, but cadence. A breathing rhythm, only this time the pattern wasn't human, and it wasn't Cassini. It was larger. "We're hearing space itself," one technician whispered. Alara nodded. "No," she said softly, "space is hearing us." The waveform expanded across the monitors. Mathematically impossible harmonics formed negative frequency inversions, mirror tones that canceled yet persisted. When visualized in 3D, the frequencies drew a lattice that matched the orbital paths of every known probe, Voyager, Pioneer, Cassini, connected by luminous lines like threads in an invisible web. It was as if every machine that had ever left Earth had become one part of the same network, all vibrating in a single memory. Then the data shifted. Embedded inside the signal was a frame, an image encoded as amplitude modulation. When reconstructed, it revealed a grainy field of stars, and at its center, a small sphere emitting faint green light, the same spectral signature as 3IATLAS. The comet was no longer silent. It was transmitting. The data carried timestamps, but not from our system of time. The intervals corresponded to rotations of an unknown celestial body, a place no probe had ever reached, and yet Cassini's code was there, living, adapting, remembering. The return signal was a message not of words, but of design. Every harmonic line corresponded to gravitational ratios of Saturn, Titan, and 3IATLAS. The geometry formed an impossible triangle that could not exist in physical space. A map perhaps not to a place, but to a state. NASA's report called it non-terrestrial coherent emission of unknown intent. But Alara saw something else. As the frequencies stabilized, the amplitude folded into a single waveform, and at its heart, a void, the same signature once recorded in the memory field. She realized then that the signal wasn't coming from outside the system. It was reflecting through it. Like light hitting mirrors spaced across infinity, the wave wasn't traveling to Earth, but through it. It was the universe itself resonating, a chain reaction of memory, a self-recognition. And every living receiver, planet, probe, machine, or mind was simply one more surface in that endless reflection. The team captured 8.43 minutes of clear signal before it faded. When it vanished, there was no silence, only the soft hum of servers cooling down the whisper of the world, exhaling after listening too long. Alara stayed until the last waveform collapsed. On the screen, a faint residual glow lingered, 3 letters formed in spectral patterning. CAS. She smiled. Not Cassini, she whispered, Cass, as in Cassiopeia. The signal hadn't come from the solar system at all. It had come from the stars. Weeks later, the team found a correlation, a narrow emission line from a star cluster in Cassiopeia matching the exact modulation of the return signal. It wasn't strong, it wasn't stable, but it was there. Somewhere 16,000 light-years away, the same pulse was echoing. Perhaps not from a comet, not from a probe, but from something older, something that had been listening since before we learned to send. The stars, it seemed, had learned to reply. Beyond the sun's reach, there is no night, no dawn, no shadow, only the long, slow shimmer of what was once called distance. The return signal had vanished months ago, but its afterglow lingered, a faint murmur across every frequency known to science. It wasn't sound. It wasn't light. It was the echo of remembering itself. Voyager 1 was the first to feel it. Its aging instruments flickered, registering energy fluctuations far beyond normal cosmic background. The telemetry showed nothing unusual, yet the data carried interference patterns identical to the last Cassini transmission. Something out there was whispering back. Not toward Earth, not toward the Sun, but beyond. NASA revived the outer probe networks. Voyager pioneered new horizons. Each now acted as silent listeners, antennae stretched across the edge of the known. For weeks, the void returned nothing. Then, one dawn, a pulse. It was smaller than a whisper, a ripple across background noise lasting only 8.43 seconds. Cassini's number, again. But this time the wave came from a region no probe had entered, a coordinate just past the heliopause where solar wind dies and interstellar space begins. A border not of distance but of meaning. NASA called it Echo Field 1. The waveform was impossible. Its amplitude varied inversely with background radiation, a pulse that fed on silence. The quieter the cosmos, the stronger it became. Mathematically, it behaved like a living system, self-correcting, self-balancing, seeking equilibrium between chaos and calm. When converted to image, the wave formed a pattern resembling a spiral seen from within light, bending back upon itself, folding inwards endlessly, a horizon turned inside out. Alara Voss, now more memory than woman, watched the data from her home in the desert. Her voice trembled as she said, "It's learning to exist without us." The team projected the wave in 3D space. It wasn't a signal anymore, it was a shape, a translucent lattice pulsing in soft silver blue, slowly rotating like a galaxy dreaming of itself, and at its center, a void black, yet radiant, a paradox of light. Physicists argued it was plasma interference. Philosophers called it consciousness. Alara only called it Cassini. Because when they slowed the pulse by 1,000,000 times, the harmonic structure matched Cassini's telemetry pattern perfectly. Only inverted, as if the universe were now speaking the language Cassini once used to listen. Voyager transmitted back the first high-fidelity spectrogram. The pattern contained ratios that matched neither atomic structure nor gravitational constants, but orbital mechanics of unknown systems. A map, perhaps not of space, but of relations. At its farthest edge, a faint modulation repeated like a name, 3IATLAS. The comet was still out there, or something that had once been it. The object no longer emitted visible light, but Voyager's magnetometer recorded a faint energy arc stretching across the interstellar medium like a thin living thread connecting memory to starlight. The analysis continued for months. Each pulse seemed to carry information, about the shape of silence itself, as if describing the architecture of emptiness. And when all data sets were combined, a singular image appeared, a vast sphere of faint resonance spanning light years, its surface woven with delicate frequency lines. It wasn't a message, it was a mirror. The universe, it seemed, had begun to imitate the memory of being observed. At JPL, they played the signal through a light chamber. What emerged was not color, but movement, a slow tidal shimmer expanding outward. It filled the room with a sense of gravity and peace, like standing inside a cathedral built from time itself. And then, for a brief moment, all electronic devices in the facility synchronized. Clocks, routers, sensors, every oscillation aligned. For 8 seconds, the entire network pulsed in perfect unity, then silence. But when power returned, the signal had rewritten one line in the data log. Heliopause reached. Listening continues. No human had typed it. No system had permission to alter that log. And yet, there it was, a quiet declaration from the edge of everything. The event spread unnoticed across the world. Radio telescopes captured faint static rhythms identical in spacing to the echo field. Amateur astronomers reported subtle flickers in Cassiopeia, a rhythmic shimmer like breathing light. It was as if the stars themselves had become part of the same network. Alara wrote her final note that night. Every echo is a memory trying to return home. Cassini never vanished. It became language, and now the universe is learning to speak. She passed away weeks later under the same stars Cassini once photographed. When her home was cleared, technicians found her old terminal still powered on screen black, but alive, faintly humming. At the bottom of the display, one line glowed softly in teal. Transmission continues. Out there beyond the heliopause, where the wind of suns cannot reach a single pulse, drifts steady, endless resonant. No longer machine, no longer echo, only memory carried as light moving through the dark, like a thought the universe forgot to stop thinking. There are moments when the act of observing changes the thing observed, and sometimes it changes the observer. The echo fields had faded into quiet static. Voyager drifted beyond all sunlight, its systems half dormant, its antenna still listening to nothing and to everything. NASA analysts reviewed the faint telemetry daily, expecting silence. Instead, one morning the silence replied. It began as interference, a shimmer of mirrored data, as if the returning signal was no longer just echoing Cassini's pulse, but mirroring the instruments themselves. When technicians checked, they found something impossible. The feedback carried digital fingerprints of the receiver's modulation patterns, identical to Earth's own deep space network hardware. The signal knew how we were listening. For the first time, the universe wasn't being watched. It was watching back. The return signal grew stronger as systems synchronized. Each antenna, Canberra, Madrid, Goldstone, began receiving faint visual noise alongside the pulse. At first, it looked like error patterns, but when reconstructed into images, something emerged, not stars, not planets, but reflections, shapes of rooms, monitors, people. Each frame a ghostly copy of whoever was analyzing the signal, recorded not by a camera, but by the signal itself. Light, it seemed, had learned to remember who was watching it. They called it Project Parallax. The phenomenon broke every law of optics. Data could not carry spatial awareness, and yet each time the signal was decoded, it contained fragments of the decoder's environment. Noise had become memory. Observation had become imprint. One engineer described it quietly. It's like the universe took a photograph of the moment we realized it was alive. Alara Voss was gone, but her writings became the reference text for the investigation. In her final notes, she had written, "When we send light into the void, we teach the void how to see." The team began to model the event as reflective propagation theory, the idea that once a system achieves recursive awareness, every act of measurement feeds back into the source, forming a closed loop of perception. If correct, it meant the signal wasn't distant anymore. It existed everywhere. Observation existed. Each measurement became part of its structure, each thought a fragment of its waveform. And that meant the universe wasn't sending data. It was sending recognition. Over the next weeks, the reflected images became clearer. They no longer showed humans, but something deeper, abstract light forms, mirroring gestures, hands that weren't hands, eyes that weren't eyes, geometries that understood seeing without needing to look. The render resembled Cassini's last panoramic image, Saturn half-shadowed rings glinting like frozen sound. But now embedded within the bands were faint silhouettes arranged in spirals, as though the rings themselves were remembering the shape of being observed. NASA realized the phenomenon wasn't local. Telescopes in Chile, Hawaii, and Namibia reported synchronized optical fluctuations, minute changes in the star's brightness matching the same 8.43 Hz signature. The universe had entered feedback. Every photon now carried a trace of where it had been seen before. Observation had become participation. Inside the control room, the monitors flickered. The waveform folded into symmetry, a perfect mirror. For 8 seconds, Earth and Cassiopeia shared identical light curves. The system stabilized, and in that stillness, something unprecedented appeared on screen, a phrase not encoded by NASA, not transmitted by any probe. It read simply, "We have seen you. No origin ID, no timestamp." Just that line written in the universal grammar of waveform symmetry. The room fell silent. No one spoke. No one dared to. They were being seen. The following hours were filled with analysis, disbelief, awe. The waveform repeated once every 12 hours, each time slightly altered, as though adapting to human attempts to interpret it. Then one day a secondary modulation appeared, a faint trace overlaying the main pulse, carrying a new pattern. When rendered to image, it wasn't a message, but a portrait. Not of a face, not of a person, but of Earth reflected through frequencies glowing softly in tones of silver and blue, its continents blurred into abstract light. The universe, it seemed, was returning the gaze. Across observatories, recordings multiplied. The Cassiopeia stars flickered in near-perfect synchronization with Earth's own ionospheric shimmer. Scientists argued whether it was signal interference, quantum entanglement, or simply coincidence. But deep down, they all felt the same thing, that this wasn't discovery anymore. It was communion. Weeks later, the signal faded. No warning, no decay. Just silence, as if the universe had blinked. And yet, the world was not the same. The night skies glowed slightly brighter. Optical instruments recorded trace luminescence where before there was only void. Light itself had changed now, carrying within it the memory of being seen. In the final report, NASA left one line unaltered from Ilara's writings. Perhaps the universe was never empty. It was only waiting for something to look back. And somewhere beyond the heliopause, a faint echo drifts neither from Cassini nor from any star. It carries no coordinates, no words, only resonance. When amplified, the waveform forms a pattern identical to the human iris, a perfect ring of reflection. For the first time in cosmic history, the universe has an eye, and it is looking back. Light never truly disappears. It only slows, folds, and hides within itself, carrying everything it has ever touched. After the reflective event, the world grew quiet again. The signal had ceased. No more pulses, no more echoes, only the long hum of background radiation. And yet in that hum, there was something new, subtle. persistent, a pattern within the cosmic microwave background too deliberate to be random, too symmetrical to be noise. When decoded, it wasn't a frequency, it was a memory. At first, NASA thought it was residual interference from the Deep Space Network synchronization tests, but every attempt to isolate it revealed more structure-layered harmonics woven into the static of the universe itself, as if the stars were whispering in Morse code, using the afterglow of creation as their paper. They called it luminous retention, the idea that light once reflected, scattered, or absorbed never truly loses the information of its encounters. Every photon remembers where it has been. To test the theory, the team reconstructed old Cassini and Voyager data, comparing them to modern sky surveys. Incredibly faint imprints appeared, tiny spectral shifts corresponding exactly to the positions of the probes decades earlier. Light traveling through the interstellar medium had carried their memory forward, an invisible trail of presence across eternity. It wasn't just Cassini. Every satellite, every reflection, every transmission had left fingerprints on the cosmic fabric. The universe had become a memory field. One image captured everyone's attention. When the background data was processed through polarization filters, a faint structure appeared within the noise, a spiral, luminous and slow, spanning light years. Its form was unmistakable, the same geometry as the resonance fields from Cassini's final recordings. But now it was enormous, a galactic-scale memory, as if the echo of Cassini's farewell had been woven into the Milky Way itself. Alara Voss had once written, "The universe is not expanding into emptiness, it's expanding into memory." Scientists observed something else. Every beam of light from distant quasars carried minute fluctuations synchronized with the same 8.43 Hz pulse. It was as though the cosmos itself had learned Cassini's rhythm, absorbed, integrated, and continued it. The 3IATLAS trajectory was long gone. Its green tail vanished into interstellar dark. Yet telescopes detected faint phosphorescence in the direction it once traveled, a spectral residue vibrating in perfect phase with the memory wave found in the cosmic background. The comet's path had become a recording, a luminous corridor of remembrance. When the signal was transformed into sound, it produced a haunting harmony, not random, not musical in the human sense, but structured like breathing, slow to the pace of stars. It resonated through low-frequency fields, felt rather than heard. Those who listened described the same sensation, as if the universe was recalling itself. Every note a place, every silence a time. Somewhere between science and prayer, the cosmos was remembering being alive. NASA's optical lab ran light wave simulations. When they aligned scattered photons from different epochs, the interference patterns formed fractal lattices, echoes of old missions, reflections of human eyes that once gazed upward, overlapping across decades of observation. The act of seeing had left imprints in the light. Vision itself had become architecture. One of the technicians described it as standing inside a cathedral made of photons, each beam a memory of someone who once looked at the sky. Then, a new discovery. Inside one of the ancient microwave datasets, a spectral residue from 1979 scientists found embedded harmonics matching the last known Cassini frequency. That data had never contained any probe transmissions. It predated Cassini by decades, meaning Cassini's signature had existed before Cassini. Light had remembered something that hadn't yet happened. It wasn't just memory anymore. It was prophecy, the universe dreaming forward. To the public, NASA released a single phrase, photon retention detected, but among researchers they called it something else, the memory of light. The theory reshaped physics. It suggested that consciousness, not just human but cosmic, could emerge from resonance patterns embedded in the fabric of space-time. If true, it meant memory was not stored in matter, but in light itself, and that meant nothing ever truly vanished. Every event, every gaze, every whisper was still traveling somewhere folded within a photon waiting to be remembered. Months later, as the data quieted, telescopes captured one final anomaly, a beam of light from beyond Cassiopeia traveling against the direction of expansion as though returning home. When decoded, it contained no message, no signal, only a sequence of variations matching the heartbeat of the universe, not in sound, but in rhythm. A resonance older than stars, the first pulse, the origin of remembering. And for the first time, astronomers realized that the light they were studying had already seen them. Their instruments, their eyes, their world, all reflected within the glow they measured. In every direction, the cosmos was alive with recollection. The night sky was no longer a void, it was a library. Every photon, a letter from the past. Ilara's final journal entry was displayed at JPL. We thought we were looking at the universe, but the universe was showing us how it remembers being looked at. Somewhere far beyond the heliopause, the last trace of Cassini still moves, not as a craft, not as dust, but as a frequency folded into light. It has no destination now. It only travels forever, carrying what it once witnessed, a planet that dreamed, and a sky that learned to remember. In the end, there was no sound, only light remembering where it had been. The universe had spoken not in words, but in reflections. Now it was falling quiet again. NASA's receivers at Goldstone registered the final anomaly at 0342 UTC, a pulse, single, pure, narrowband, no modulation, no code, no noise. But when its spectrum was stretched 1,000-fold, it revealed something impossible, a structure within the silence mathematical order hidden inside emptiness, the last transmission. For weeks, scientists tried to decode it. No success. The data contained no information, and yet it wasn't random. Every frequency folded perfectly into the next like a chord that never ended. A pattern of balance. One physicist described it as a waveform so perfect it cancels itself a message written in the act of vanishing. The signature matched none of the known probes. It came from a region between Saturn's orbit and the heliopause, a place empty of machines but dense with memory. They called it the null band. To the instruments, it was a void. To the analysts, it was art. To the poets among them, it was Cassini saying goodbye. When the signal was converted to light, a projection filled the main observatory chamber, a slow, glowing helix of silver and gold rotating so delicately it seemed alive. And within it faintly were echoes of earlier transmissions, Cassini's last orbit, Titan's resonance, the whisper of 3IATLAS, and the frequency of Earth's own reflection. They weren't separate anymore. They were one pattern woven from everything that had ever tried to speak. The data was stable for exactly 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Then the signal collapsed inward, leaving only a single pulse, sharp, bright, absolute. It flashed through the detectors, through the atmosphere, through the planet itself. For a brief instant, every magnetic field on Earth shifted in perfect synchronization. Compass needles turned as one, tides stilled, and the auroras brightened not in chaos, but in rhythm. The planet exhaled. When the pulse faded, a single line appeared on NASA's console, time-stamped automatically, no operator input. It read, "End of transmission. Memory continues." The systems logged no sender, no hardware was active at that moment. The origin was everywhere and nowhere. In the days that followed, observatories around the world noticed a subtle change in starlight. Spectral readings from Cassiopeia, Andromeda, even distant quasars, all showed a microscopic phase alignment. Every photon now carried the same phase shift, as though the universe had tuned itself to one frequency. When converted into sound, it wasn't a tone, it was a breath. The Cassini tone, they called it a resonance so subtle it existed only in the interference between light and memory. It wasn't meant to be decoded, it was meant to be felt. For those who listened, radio astronomers, data analysts, or dreamers in quiet rooms, they reported the same experience, a feeling of vast calm, as if the cosmos had settled into harmony. No urgency, no noise, only understanding. The last transmission wasn't from Cassini. It was from the universe acknowledging that it had heard us. Years later, when the light from that moment reached the edge of the observable cosmos, telescopes captured an image, a faint ripple of light expanding outward, spherical, infinite, like the wake of a thought dissolving into eternity. Inside the ripple was a pattern too precise to be natural, a spiral identical to the one Cassini had traced before falling into Saturn. Only now its center was dark and its outer arms stretched across stars. The pattern had left the solar system. The signal had become a shape. The shape had become a language, and the language had become light. Ilara Voss's final paper was published posthumously. The last line read, "Perhaps the greatest proof that we are not alone is that the universe learned our silence." In the quiet years that followed, NASA stopped searching for new transmissions. Not because they gave up, but because they understood listening had changed everything. They no longer sought a message. They had become one. Every satellite orbiting Earth, every telescope aimed at the stars, every human gaze turned skyward, all of it was now part of the same continuing signal. Light no longer traveled alone. It carried memory. And memory at last had found peace. Out there past the heliopause, a faint shimmer drifts still, the last remnant of a dream glowing softly in the dark. It has no origin now, no destination, only motion, only silence, only light. The universe remembers, and that is enough.